The rain fell softly on the black marble driveway as I stood outside the mansion that had once been my home. The house glowed with warm light, laughter echoing through the tall windows. But I wasn't welcome inside anymore. My name is Aiden Cole, and this was the day I learned that blood means nothing when greed runs deeper. Inside, the family lawyer cleared his throat. According to the late Mr. Cole's will, he began, the entire estate, including the family business Cole Enterprises, will be transferred to Mrs. Carol Cole and her son Daniel Cole. I waited for my name. Just 2 syllables, that's all I wanted to hear. But the lawyer looked down at the folder and closed it. Silence. Then Daniel smirked. Guess the old man finally saw you for what you are, a charity case. Carol's red-polished fingers rested on his arm. Now, Daniel, she said sweetly, turning to me with that rehearsed sympathy she wore so well. Your father wanted what's best for you. You're still young. You'll find your own path. My father's portrait hung behind her. Stern eyes, proud jaw, the man who raised me after my mother died. The man who had promised, you'll never have to fight alone, Aiden. Now he was gone and I was surrounded by people who couldn't wait to erase me. Is that all? I asked quietly. Carol's smile tightened. You'll receive a small stipend for 6 months. After that, I'm afraid you're on your own. A murmur spread through the room. My father's business partners looked away, avoiding my gaze. I could feel the pity in the air, thick and suffocating. I didn't want their pity. I wanted answers. I turned to the lawyer. There must be a mistake. My father wouldn't. He shook his head. These were his final instructions, son. I'm sorry, son. The words stung coming from him when the people who should have used it most had already disowned me. Carol rose from her seat, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. Pack your things tonight, she said. We'd like you gone by morning. I wanted to shout, to tear down the lies she'd built around my father's memory. But instead I swallowed my anger. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. That night I packed what little I owned. A few clothes, an old photograph of my parents, and my father's rusted watch, the only thing they hadn't thought worth keeping. Daniel leaned against the doorway as I zipped my bag. Don't take it personally, brother, he said with a grin. This house was never meant for people like you. I didn't reply. Words meant nothing anymore. As I walked out, the mansion lights dimmed behind me. The rain had turned heavier, soaking through my coat, but I didn't stop. My breath fogged the cold night air as I reached the iron gates and looked back one last time. That house had been my childhood. My first steps, my first birthday, the echo of my father's laughter. And now it was gone, stolen by the people who called themselves family. I stood beneath the flickering streetlight, clutching the old watch in my palm. The world suddenly felt enormous and I felt like nothing at all. But even as despair clawed at my chest, another feeling began to burn quietly inside me. Resolve. If they wanted to erase me, I would give them a story they could never forget. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when. But someday I would return, not as the abandoned son begging for scraps, but as the man they'd regret betraying. The rain washed down my face, mingling with tears I refused to admit were there. I turned away from the mansion and walked into the darkness, leaving behind the boy they had cast out. That night, under that cold streetlight, Aiden Cole died, and something far stronger was born. The first few years after they threw me out were a blur of hunger, noise, and survival. I slept in a broken-down apartment above a mechanic's shop, the kind of place where rats were your only neighbors and the walls smelled like gasoline. I worked wherever I could, unloading trucks, washing dishes, anything that kept me moving. At night I studied. Old library computers, free online courses, borrowed textbooks. I devoured them all. Finance, engineering, management. I wanted to understand how my father had built his empire and how I could build one of my own. I remembered his words every night before I fell asleep. Strength isn't given, Aiden. It's built. So I built myself from nothing. By day I learned to negotiate with ruthless suppliers and impossible bosses. By night I learned to dream again. I watched men in suits drive cars worth more than my entire life and thought, one day that'll be me. The years hardened me, shaped me. The boy who once stood crying in the rain outside his own home was gone. In his place was someone colder, quieter, and hungrier. My first break came from a construction job. The company I worked for went bankrupt, and when the boss walked out, I stayed. I took over the unfinished contracts, called clients myself, and somehow delivered the projects on time. People started noticing. By 25, I had my first company, AC Logistics. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I reinvested every dollar, working 18-hour days. When people rested, I planned. When they doubted me, I worked harder. 10 years later, Aiden Steelworks became a national name, a manufacturing and logistics powerhouse that supplied parts to industries across the country. I had hundreds of employees, international clients, and a reputation built on precision and discipline. The media called me the Phantom Founder, because I never gave interviews or appeared at galas. I didn't care about fame. I cared about the empire, my empire, that grew stronger with every deal. And then one morning, as I read through quarterly reports in my office overlooking the city, my secretary walked in. "Mr. Cole," she said, hesitating. "There's someone here asking for you." I looked up. "Who?" She paused. "A man named Daniel Cole. He says he's your brother." The world seemed to freeze for a moment. That name, the one I'd buried deep under years of hard work and silence, came crashing back like a ghost. I closed the file on my desk, straightened my tie, and smiled for the first time in a long while. "Send him in," I said. As I waited, I stared out at the skyline, at the city that had made me, hardened me, and turned my scars into steel. They had cut me out of the family once. Now they were crawling back to the empire I'd built from their rejection. And this time I'd decide who stays and who gets cut out. When Daniel walked into my office, time folded back 10 years. Same confident stride, same smug grin. Only this time, it was cracked by desperation. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. "Aiden," he said, forcing a smile. "It's been a long time." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Not long enough," I replied. He laughed awkwardly. "I deserve that." His gaze darted around the office. The skyline view, the awards on the wall, the polished floors. "You've done well for yourself. Dad would be proud." That. The word twisted something inside me, but I kept my face still. "What do you want, Daniel?" He hesitated. "It's about the company. Cole Enterprises. It's in trouble. The market crashed, the suppliers pulled out, and you need money," I finished for him. He exhaled sharply. "We need a partner. Someone who understands business. You're the only one who can save us." I almost laughed. The same brother who had thrown me out like trash was now sitting in front of me, begging for help. Before I could answer, the door opened again. Carol stepped in. Her once golden hair was streaked with gray, her elegance dulled by time and worry. Still, she carried herself like a queen whose castle was burning. "Aiden," she said softly. "It's good to see you." I stood. I wish I could say the same. She flinched. For the first time, I saw something that almost looked like regret in her eyes. "I know you have every reason to hate us," she began. "But your father's company, his legacy, is falling apart. Help us rebuild it. For him." For a moment, silence hung between us. The sound of the city below filled the space. Cars, sirens, the hum of a life that had gone on without them. Finally I spoke. "You want me to save the company that you stole from me?" "It wasn't like that," she started, but I raised a hand. "Spare me the performance, Carol. I was there. I remember every word you said." Daniel stepped forward. "Look, we made mistakes, okay? But we're family." "Family." I repeated, my voice low. "You taught me exactly what that word means." I let them sit there in silence before pulling a folder from my desk. "Fine. I'll help. But on my terms." They didn't hesitate. Desperation makes people blind. They signed every document I gave them. Transfer agreements, merger papers, everything. Carol smiled faintly. "Thank you, Aiden. You have no idea what this means." "Oh, I do," I said. As they left, Daniel turned at the door. "You won't regret this." But as I looked down at the papers, the ones that quietly transferred every last piece of Cole Enterprises into my control, I smiled to myself. No, I wouldn't regret it at all. Because this wasn't mercy. It was the beginning of justice. A month passed. The deal was complete. Every signature, every document they'd so eagerly signed had sealed their fate. Cole Enterprises, the company they once stole from me, now belonged entirely to Aiden Cole. I hadn't heard from them since. Not until that morning. My assistant walked in, her voice hesitant. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Carol and Mr. Daniel are here again. They say it's urgent." I nodded. "Send them to the old mansion. I'll meet them there." The house stood just as I remembered, grand, silent, and cold. Only now it was mine. The iron gates opened as my car rolled through. I stepped out and inhaled deeply, the scent of wet earth and old wood filling my lungs. Inside, the halls echoed with ghosts of my childhood. My father's laughter, my mother's lullabies, and the sound of betrayal that had once shattered me. Daniel and Carol waited in the drawing room, both looking smaller than I remembered. He was restless, she was trembling. "What's the meaning of this, Aiden?" Daniel demanded. "The company's accounts are frozen. Our house, this house, is in your name. There must be some mistake." I smiled faintly. "No mistake. You signed everything over to me. It was part of the merger deal, remember?" Carol's face went pale. "You tricked us." I met her gaze. "No. I offered you help. You just never asked what kind." Daniel's fists clenched. "You can't do this to us. We're your family." "Family," I echoed, stepping closer. "You cut me out of that word years ago." He took a step toward me, his voice shaking with fury. "We'll fight this in court." I chuckled. "With what money?" "The lawyers, the house, the company, they're all mine now." Carol sank into a chair, whispering, "Please, Aiden. We have nowhere to go." For a long moment I said nothing. I remembered that night under the streetlight. The rain, the humiliation, the cold that felt endless. And then I remembered the promise I made to myself. They will remember my name. I reached into my coat pocket and handed Carol an envelope. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a check, just enough for a modest apartment and a few months of food. "That's all." Daniel spat. I looked at them both, my voice calm and final. "That's mercy. More than you ever showed me." As they stood there, broken and silent, I walked toward the door. At the threshold, I turned once more to face them. "This house once threw me out," I said quietly. "Now it throws you out. Consider that balance restored." I stepped outside as the security guards closed the doors behind me. The same cold streetlight flickered by the gate, just like that night long ago. Only this time I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I had my father's legacy, my empire, and my revenge. And as the mansion lights faded behind me, I finally felt it. Not triumph, not joy, but peace.